Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews. Today we are going to take a look at a line of figures that I have never reviewed before. However, you may note this figure was recently shown in a Dinosaurs video that I had posted, actually probably a few months ago now. But it was a figure that I picked up on a lot of figures on eBay. There were 3 different ones from the Dinosaur King, and the figure is by Sega. And I never had any of the figures from that line before, and now that I actually purchased a few, I really do want to get a hold of more. The only problem is they're so expensive. There's a long line of figures in the line, many different, very obscure species that I would love to have, and I actually am really excited about the figure in general, even though it's not what I would typically call an amazing dinosaur figure. But honestly, I'm super sold on these figures, and I don't even know why for sure, because they're not as detailed or as accurate or anything as like most figures that I would be really excited about, but something about them is just extremely appealing to me. Maybe it's kind of like the basic nature of the figures, but still kind of, well, they look really cool, and the fact that there's so many obscure species just has me really intrigued with the line. But this one specifically is the Yangchuanosaurus, and just right there, how many figures out there do you know of the Yangchuanosaurus? There aren't very many, so it's awesome, honestly, to have a Yangchuanosaurus in the line, along with many other figures that I would love to get a hold of. But as of right now, I only have 3, and I figured we would start reviewing them with this Yangchuanosaurus, so let's get a closer look at it right now. So starting up here at the head sculpt, you can see that as far as the head sculpt goes, it looks really cool. It just doesn't have, again, the type of detail that I would expect to find on most figures currently, but considering this figure was made a while back, it's totally understandable. I mean, it's not that old, but definitely not really that new either, and I definitely don't expect accuracy in these figures at all, so I really won't be judging this as far as accuracy goes. But as far as a really cool looking dinosaur figure, I definitely think it looks quite nice. You've got some pretty decent looking skin texture for the most part up here on the head. You've got a reddish eye, which does appear to be painted pretty much perfectly on both sides. This one has a little bit of sloppiness, but for the most part it looks quite nice. We primarily have like a very dark bluish type color for the body color, and then you have a little bit of a reddish coloration up here as far as that crest up there on the head goes, and you have kind of some light whites that litter the dinosaur here and there. It does look pretty cool, and then you have like a creamy underbelly right here. I do like that as well. The teeth are kind of sloppily painted, honestly. You can see that the paint doesn't really appear to be applied too well. It's very thick, very sloppy as far as that goes. It could have looked good because you can see the teeth themselves are quite nicely elaborated out from that area. I feel like maybe if you would have just left the inside pink and then dry brushed over those teeth, it would have looked a lot better. But at the same time, it doesn't look terrible as far as the actual sculpt goes, but the paint itself is kind of bad. The area right there inside the mouth, that little skin flap, looks decent. It's got a nice dark reddish coloration as far as that goes, and you can see the tongue is included in there, but it doesn't really seem to have any detail or anything to it. And it also doesn't have an articulated jaw or anything, so we can only get a look at what we can see right here. You can't really get in there any better than that. Moving down the top of the animal, you can see some ridges that run along the spinal column, something we often see companies include on theropods. It looks pretty cool and gives it that little bit of flashiness with that reddish coloration that does run along those ridges. As we start to move down into the neck, you can see some pretty nice skin texture, and then once we get down here into the shoulder blade, you don't really see the shoulder blade protruding from the skin or anything too well, and the arms are really quite large, honestly. It looks like he's been working out quite a bit, but you can see that the skin texture pretty much stays the same style as what you see all over the rest of the dinosaur. As we move down into the hands look pretty nice, nothing over the top. You've got some nicely painted nails with like a dark blackish coloration. And then coming up into the body, once again, it's what I'm saying when I say they're kind of like basic dinosaur figures, because you don't really see too much detail going on. You don't really see any type of skin stretching or skin folding or anything going on. You don't see any type of a rib cage. It's just pretty much the basic version of a dinosaur, but I really do think that it's extremely cool. I don't really know why I like them so much, but they're very appealing. You do have a little bit of musculature here in the thigh as we move down into the feet. Even the legs are extremely generic as how they're like very stiff and very straight. You've got some pretty nicely sculpted feet, nice painted nails here on the feet, nice like gloss coat on them with a grayish coloration, and the dew claws are actually painted back there. You can see this light creamy color leaks into the body here and there in certain areas. It does look really nice. I actually quite like the paint scheme on the figure. And then as we move out the length of the tail, you can see that the scaling continues, and as does the really cool paint scheme that they've gone with here. I don't really know what it is about the paint scheme, but I actually really quite like it. It's definitely a very cool look. But as far as the figure goes, you're really not going to see any difference on this side than what you saw on the previous side, because it's a completely neutral figure as far as the pose goes. It's very nicely articulated, so let's go ahead and take a look at the articulation of our Yangchuanosaurus. So as far as the articulation goes, we do have the articulation here in the shoulder, we have articulation in the hips, and then we have the articulation in the tail. It's a swivel tail, so it does have some articulation. I mean, it's nothing over the top. It's certainly not like a NECA figure or anything like that. We don't have that much articulation, but having any type of articulation on a dinosaur figure is always fun, and I think it looks pretty nice. And you can see it actually balances fairly well. Sometimes it doesn't, and you kind of have to always keep it in this position where the body's sort of almost like a tripod position, where the tail's almost touching, but you can see the tail actually is off the ground a little bit. That's pretty much the only way to get it to stand, because once I lean it forward and try to get it in a more natural position, it does fall backwards. But once it's up like this, there we go, it usually stands fairly well. As far as the size goes, from the tail to the head, you're going to see this Yangchuanosaurus come in at about 11 inches, somewhere in that range, or about 28 centimeters. And then for a height just under 5 inches, about 4 3/4 inches, or around 12.5 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Bachylovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line, and you can see next to these figures that this Yangchuanosaurus is probably what I would consider a medium-sized figure. Honestly, it's not really that large. It's, I would say, yeah, definitely about a medium-sized figure, so it's decently sized, but nothing over the top huge. Again, kind of one of the issues I have with paying so much for the figures is the fact that they're not gigantic or anything, and I have a few Sega figures that were larger, and I actually have a few newer Sega figures from the Jurassic World line that were probably pretty small, similar actually in size to this. So this one is kind of making me wish it was a little bit bigger, but at the same time, it is at a pretty convenient size. So this Sega Dinosaur King Yangchuanosaurus figure is extremely cool. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, that is for sure. I don't think most people that watch my channel will actually probably like these figures, just because they're usually more interested in the more highly detailed dinosaur figure, and that's not what you really see here with the Sega Dinosaur King figures. They do have some pretty nice detail, but they're just not overly detailed. You don't really see much going on as far as movement that you could portray throughout the sculpt. The sculpt is very basic. You pretty much just have the body shape of the dinosaur, along with some fairly nice looking skin texture with some nice scaling, and then that's about it. You don't really get any type of skin folding or skin wrinkling going on, but at the same time, I still think it does look really quite nice, and that's almost like the theme of these figures, similar to like the Invicta figures, how the Invicta figures, their charm was the fact that they didn't really have any paint on them, so that's kind of something that you associate with those figures, and one of the things that I guess people end up liking about it, well, sort of the same thing with these Dinosaur King figures, is that they're not overly detailed, they all have a similar style to them, and it's just something that I've grown to really like after purchasing my first 3 figures, so I really do quite like the sculpt, even if it isn't that highly detailed. I think the paint job as well looks really quite cool. The paint isn't over the top or anything, but at the same time, it's got a pretty interesting looking paint scheme, and I feel like all the colors play off of each other really well and do look really quite nice in comparison to each other, as well as the actual paint application looks good. It's definitely a fairly natural application to the paint. It doesn't look like paint on a figure. It really does look like body color the way it's been applied, so that is also a plus. The articulation is okay, nothing crazy, nothing over the top in that area either, but it does have articulation, so we've at least got to give it a couple of cool points in that area for sure. You've got the 3 different areas of articulation, and I think that's kind of the way all of the figures are. They have the articulation in the tail and the limbs, or at least that's how all the figures I've seen from this line have appeared to me, all that very same similar style of articulation, and honestly I think that's pretty much as they needed, so it's still pretty cool. So overall, I do quite like the figure a lot, and if you do want to pick this up, it's probably going to be a little bit expensive, but it's definitely not unachievable, I would say. So I will try my best to find one on eBay for you guys. I'll throw a link in the description if I can find one, and if not, try to find it somewhere. If you can, scoop it up because it is really quite cool. But before you do all that, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.